Gentlemen, this morning at 10:30, welcome to our forum today at the Frontale. Current impulses for our industry, for facades and windows. And we do have this fair for you specifically, and of course, also for all the participants that are joining us digitally. We have a very, very interesting set of different presentations about sustainability, and those are two of the main pillars of our future of our industry and also our products in general. And on top of that, that is also ensuring our quality. Of course, there's no point if you have a very efficient and good solution that is sustainable, but we also need qualified processes when it comes to assembly and also putting them in. That's why we are going to do that. So for windows and also for facades, so that would be object business, and that is what we are going to introduce today. We're going to talk about what is new, and then we are going to also talk about all the different processes so that we can definitely ensure the right quality of everything. So that is the standard program of today, and we do have about 30-minute blocks where our speakers are going to then give you an impulse for the different topics. And of course, you can also ask questions if you want to. Just raise your hand or scream out loud. I think there's also a microphone back there. And for those that are joining us digitally behind the screens, you also have the possibility to send questions online. I can read them on my tablet right here, and I'm also then going to read them out loud for everybody to hear. All right, so that is what you can expect today until 2 p.m. So this is a very interesting range of topics for our industry. So I myself am the head of the Association of Windows and Facades in Germany. So our association represents about 70% of the industry in many different facets when it comes to lobbying. So really just influencing and having new ideas, norms, technology, market data, all of that is very interesting and relevant for our industry as well as marketing. And I would just like to give you a quick impulse and some insights. So this is very interesting and very important for our industry. So this is just a program for the next 30 minutes, and I would just like to take you on this journey, talking about the different topics that are important. So that would be climate protection, then of course also support, financial support, which is very important. And of course, where are we going? And also what kind of requirements could be there also when it comes to the vision of the political communication with our industry. And then there are also two more topics that are very, very much innovative. And of course, they're also moving me personally, I have to say. They're very important and also very, very needed for our industry to move forward. All right, so many of you are very much familiar with this chart. So, of course, because of the pandemic and because of all the challenges we've been facing, we've had some difficulties, but climate protection is still our number one goal by law. That is something that we have to do in the future. Future generations are going to have to do that, and we have to face that today already. So we see the different sectors right here. You can see the red part. So this is really the corridor we have to be in by the end of this decade. This is where we need to be. So it's a clear reduction of CO2 emissions in our sector, in our industry. And of course, that is not just wishful thinking. It's not just nice to have or something we can potentially do, but it is a law. So it's definitely something that we have to do and something that is being monitored on a regular basis to just see if we are on track right here. And if we just look at what happened this year, we were supposed to be at 113 million tons when it comes to CO2 emissions, but we're only at 115 million at the moment. So you can say, oh, it's only a difference of 2 million. That's not that bad. We're still on track. However, if you look at everything, if you just look at it being lowered by 5 million every year, so next year we'll need to reach 108 million. So of course, the two that we're missing plus the five that you need to accomplish anyways are going to have to be added. So in 2022, we are going to have to accomplish that theoretically in comparison to what we have accomplished over the last year. It's definitely more than twice as much. So you can see that we're definitely lagging behind, and the challenge for our climate protection is definitely huge. It's enormous, and of course, we're going to have to face that. And because of the war in Ukraine, and of course, because of the shortage of energy and also the supply uncertainty, we have to say that top of the decarbonization, which is also something that is not going to everything just using pellets and things like that, or energy in general. Of course, we also have to make sure that we use as little as of those resources as well. So efficiency is on one side, and of course, this is sort of like the building in and of itself, and then also machine technology that is really what's carrying the carbonized energy. So it could be anything, could be a heating pump, it could be pellets, it could be anything, and that shows us what the future could bring on the other hand. So those are the challenges we're facing at the moment. And of course, being sort of the building in and of itself, we can definitely contribute to that. So we are talking about the superpower of what we have. We actually have the adaptation to the climate change at the bottom right-hand corner. So of course, that is more and more important. Temperatures are rising, our summer is more or is hotter, and of course there are more hot days. And of course, we can't only solve this problem in the wintertime, but of course we need to have different settings and things like that to also consider the summertime. And of course, we have daylight, etc. So if you look at this room right here, if everything was dark, that would be really bad. So daylight is definitely something that goes along with life quality and our health, and of course, ventilation as well. Those are all points for our industry that we have to put in line. And of course, in combination with it being something that people are willing to pay for and able to pay for is definitely quite difficult. So we need to be efficient, and we also need to see the positive effects, for example, of solar powered energy and things like that. So of course, why shouldn't we use the sun for our own natural heating in buildings? That would be just perfect, right? So we should be able to use that and also be able to finance that. So we have lots of different points in our industry, and you can see this circle right here. It's automation, cooling during the night, sun protection when we need it in the summer, solar in the winter time, daylight, air, things like that. So everything is really in favor of our building piece being a central topic for everything being more energy efficient. So if we look at the four main points or the main intentions, the impulses that we see here that are important for our industry would be these right here. So definitely the evaluation of our products, and when it comes to comparing them to other building blocks, when it comes to building a house, it would definitely be considering solar energy. So roof is actually set up in a way that it can carry that. It's not a very dynamic building piece. And of course, windows can do a lot more, and they can have a lot more of a positive impact. And of course, that is something that we have to take into consideration when we also think about our windows, because we also want to really have big windows in the future as well. So on top of that, we also have subsidies. So of course, we see lots of volatility. So there's no new construction that is being subsidized or supported like that. What it's going to be like in the future, that's still being processed at the moment. So we know from the past that when it comes to machine technology, there's more volume in terms of support, sometimes 40-45% for replacing your heating when it comes to energy. So it could be 2025 in the future, and we're just going to have to look into that. So when it comes to really just the house in and of itself, we still have to focus on these attractive support options. So that's why we want to have an adaptation for that as well. So in the future, we really want to also consider what we need in the summertime, because there's no point to have just AC in our buildings, because plaster is also very important, because we can't only do it artificially. We also need to do it with our buildings. So we say that we can do that in the summer, but if we have the sun automation. And last but not least, in order to reach our goal corridor, of course, we definitely need to push in that direction. 2% rate of redevelopment is something that means that we are going to have to need another 50 years in order to be at a point where we need to be below 1%. And for us, that is an opportunity, but at the same time, it's also a big challenge to really contribute to climate protection to that degree. And studies also show that. So we have a B&L market research, and that really shows the repercussions of the war. And then, of course, the price development as well as interest development. So you can see that new construction is sort of going to have this little dent, if you want to call it that, and depends on many different factors. But we can definitely see that our forecast is that redevelopment is going to be more dynamic. And of course, if you look at that, We are at 25% growth over the next 5 to 10 years. And of course, for our industry, that is very, very valuable. There's a high potential for us. And of course, all the processes in our companies need to be adapted to that. Demounting, renovation, redevelopment, and other processes when it comes to building it back up. So if we look at current discussions in regards to the main points when it comes to climate protection, we can definitely say that the market is definitely steering ahead. So the market really determines everything. The energy prices are going to be so important that you're forced to redevelop or to renovate. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to afford it. And looking at the CO2 price, that's how they started. And ever since this year, there's a price for that when it comes to energy being more expensive. Now there's another kick on top. And that, of course, is now really pushing the energy prices to the top. Now they're going to put sort of like a lid on that. However, if you look at that overall, you can really look at the building in and of itself, and you can see that that's not going to be good enough. So the market in and of itself is not going to be able to set the impulse that we need in order to push forward all the renovations that we need to push. So I already said it that support is most important. So we need incentives. It's expensive. And we really need to make it where there's funding for it. So we need to support them in their wish to be more energy efficient. So that is definitely very important. That's how we are going to have an influence. And of course, the minimum standard also needs to be set. So we know what is necessary. That needs to be set. And in the future, it's going to be done by the EU. And there should also be MEPs, minimum energy performance standards. And that would be sort of like a social process that makes it where you have to redevelop or renovate old buildings. And I'm sure that it's going to come. The U value is not everything, obviously. So, of course, Mr. Schlitzberger is going to tell you more about that. So we can't only talk about 3-meter walls and insulation and things like that, but the U value is not all, what it's all about. We have many other potential as well, for example, different values that also can be part of this process. But today we have to define what climate neutral ready means. So somebody that's renovating in 10 or 15 years, they don't want to start over again. So we are going to have to say, okay, do it this way. And if you do it this way, it's going to be fine for a long time. So this is really the renovation or redevelopment in several steps that you take. So first you do the window, then the roof, then the walls, etc., or the other way around, and then the machines, etc. So you have to define what the processes need to be so that you have a climate neutral building at the end of the day. And of course, that's how it has to be supported. And we do have a 10-point package right here, together with a representation that really shows sun protection, for example. There are 3 industrial companies in Berlin that are dealing with that, but we also have 2 other associations that work with us, and we can really see political situations right here. So there are 10 overall, and I just summarized them over here, and it gets started with just renovation. We want the right U values, etc., with solar power. We also want experts that need to be made a topic, and we also want to develop ideas that are going to show us what it could be like. And we're definitely part of all the different impulses that are introduced to you. And we are definitely trying to make it where we can actually get some ideas to our politicians, things that are important to us. So if you want to, you can go ahead, take a closer look, and you can also see our transparent buildings right here. And otherwise, you can also go to Hall 1. There's our booth, and you can also take a closer look. So we can see that I don't know who knows about it, but we have the we had the so-called heating pump summit in Berlin, and the goal at the moment during this difficult phase of heating, etc., in private households is really about making it where they actually use more heating pumps in the market. We don't have a high rate. We really want to get to 500,000 per year. We're at 150,000 right now. And there's lots of dynamics and of course, lots of positive lobbying that is being done in Berlin and also on the part of politicians, because we do think it makes sense to really be more climate neutral with buildings, and supporting that is good. And for us, that is also a good point, because a heating pump in a very inefficient building that you just have to have run at 60 degrees with a high energy bill is not going to be sustainable. And what we're trying to do at the moment is we just try to really look into the heating industry and just find a good packaging, if you want to call it that, because we want to have efficiency and heating pumps that really requires each other. It's an opportunity for us as well when it comes to redevelopment and decarbonized situations like heating pumps, and it's only going to work with the right temperature. And that way you can just make it where the power consumption, the power need, that is not going to get any cheaper, that can just be used in a way that it makes sense for these machines. That's why the discussion wave of saving energy is definitely something that is very much needed. Okay, so in the beginning, I talked about us really having clear goals when it comes to climate protection and CO2 emissions, etc. So, of course, those were the 60 to 70 million tons that we are supposed to accomplish in the next few years. And there is one political statement by EFOI, the Green Party actually initiated that, and that really looked at the different building energy efficiency classes that exist in Germany. And we looked into, okay, what does it look like right now? And if you look at this paper, you can see that the worst classes, G and H, if that could be put on a modern standard, so it would then be 55, which was discussed in detail over the past few months, has now been anchored as well, so that it's going to be the new standard for new buildings. So if we had all of that and everything would be 55, that is now G and H, then we would already be at our goal, because then we'd be at 40 to 50%. So it would be 65 million tons that we're saving. And you can see that in this efficiency and also renovating old buildings. That's really the biggest potential we see. And this table is trying to summarize all of that. It's trying to summarize all the things that exist. And in Germany overall, we have A plus all the way up to H. So those would be the different energy classes. You may know this bar diagram to the right, and you can also just calculate where you are at with your building, because 1 cubic meter equals 10 kilowatt hours. And you can see, okay, if you look at your gas clock, for example, and you then calculate everything with the size of your building, for example, you can see if you're at H or A, for example. And those are the current classes that we have in Germany right now. And via the EU, it is now going to be compromised. There's supposed to be two classes less, so maybe from A to G, with new requirements that are defined, and we just tried to collect and gather the data that we have. So where's everything coming from? What were the requirements back then when it comes to G? So that was what was established in the 70s and is still valid today. And then if we look at the proportions of the buildings as well that are part of these classes. And we then looked into a window analysis that we had. We looked into the window market, and then we just tried to look at the window unit, and we have the different classes. So these are just the means, right? So it's just supposed to sort of give you some kind of overview of where we're at. So we just look at the existing building in this regard and what kind of constructions do we have there, etc. And because of the data we've gathered, we can say that we're sort of somewhere in D. We have 235 million window units in Germany that are probably, they still have unlayered windows, so U value below 3, they're not efficient at all, and that's our potential. Those 235 million window units, they should be pushed into a higher class, maybe B or A, maybe with double or triple insulation, so the U value would be around 1 or even better. And that would definitely help us at the end of the day. That would put us on the right track, and at the same time, that is our market. So if you look at to what the EU wants to do, they want to make it where the lowest classes are pushed to the top. And the question is, can we even do that? And I calculated that. So if you look at the bottom three classes, so the three worst ones we have, so then we're talking about 140 million window units divided by 11 years that are ahead of us, then we would be at 12 point something, so 13 million window units that we would have to renovate every year. And because of the market, that doesn't surprise me at all. For us, if that's really what's going to happen, it's an opportunity and a market for our future. That's our contribution, the contribution of our industry when it comes to climate protection, and of course, those are the requirements. Of course, we do need support though, and in terms of capacities, we could do it and we could contribute in that way if we really start at this point. And we are also going to have MEPs. Of course, those will be the minimum standard. So those that need to be renovated, for example. So of course, there are going to be some buildings that need to be replaced because of inefficiency. So in terms of capacities, that's going to work, and the effect that is going to be derived from that is definitely positive. So those of you who maybe also look into energy efficiency, and those experts in the beginning, because of household budgeting reasons, they thought that the program is running out. Nobody knows if there's going to be a new one, but our 5 points for more efficient subsidy is definitely long-term planning. We can't just get in and out every day. We just need good planning when it comes to that. We also need a discussion whether subsidies are going to be possible in the future. Is a standard still going to be required, and is that going to be financially supported? That could be a good incentive. I mean, you can't tell retirees that their house is old and they need to renovate it if they don't have the money to do that. So you also need to make sure that all of that fits together and is a good match. And we also have to make sure when it comes to the whole discussion of CO2, we can't forget that efficiency is still going to be important. So decarbonized, inefficient buildings that are going to be heated, they could be CO2 neutral, but they're still not going to be efficient. So we really need everything. We need everything to come together to really have efficiency. And if you just look at the linear U value, and if we only focus on that, if we just want to be at EH40, for example, and right now we're at 1.3 for a window. So if we just linearly move down, then best case, and that is just very simple calculation for the requirement of the window, that is going to make it where we can't build them anymore. And that's going to be a discussion where we say, okay, if we just want to have an efficient building in and of itself, you need more wall space because of this situation. And if it's just having tighter requirements also when it comes to subsidies, then of course we are going to see that our products are not going to be considered. And that's why it's important to us that we really have the efficiency of the value that we see right here. That's just the muted U value throughout the whole building. So we still want to be on track with efficiency values that are going to be able to be built. And of course, that is also very important. So, where are we going with this? Well, when it comes to BEG, that is our law. We don't know exactly because right now it is going to be rewritten. Apparently, it's supposed to be done by the end of this year, so the beginning of next year, and that is just part of the discussions at the moment. So, of course, it's going to be less new construction. So there is not going to be any subsidies for that anymore, or only under very specific circumstances, mainly sustainability. It's mainly going to be redevelopment and renovation. And of course, those are going to be subsidized where you are going to save CO2 emissions most. And how is that going to be translated into buildings? How can you translate CO2 into U or G values? So the values we're familiar with. So maybe Mr. Schützberger is going to tell us more about that, but that's the process ahead of us. And we are going to have to make sure that it's not only going to include CO2. So of course, depending on what you use, it could be CO2 neutral, but it's still not going to be efficient, especially if you talk about hydrogen powered as stables, for example, right? So that is going to have to be part of it. Good. So you may be familiar with the G 2020. That's going to be stricter. It's not strict yet. So we have seen that elsewhere. But that's going to happen. So we do want that to be more sufficient. And the development we see right here legally, it seems like on January 1st, there's going to be a new standard, EH55, in terms of energy consumption. So that's going to be at the same level. You may like it, you may not like it, but we still have processes ahead of us. And we then are going to have standards that can be put into towards, so hopefully it's going to be fine. And then if you look at the MEPs, which is going to be the mandatory renovation, those are the processes that are about to happen now. So if we look at that, that is our central message. We would have to say that windows are going to be smaller, and I said that at a different point as well. So if you look at the EH40 or EH30 and EH55 discussions, there are going to be U values that are not going to be feasible for us. We also need to look into solar situations. And if I'm now going to show you what happened now, just recently, since July 8th, we actually got the new right, which is now a lot stricter, which was just approved by the government. So they now tried to really have the EH55, and that should be the standard for new buildings. And of course, for primary power consumption, that has happened. But as I said, the building shell is not going to be changed for new buildings. So it's still going to be at the values we are familiar with. And we're going to make sure that when it comes to reworking it over the next year or two, the solar effects need to be included. Mr. Schlitzberger is going to tell you, and I already talked about it being very dynamic and all the different possibilities of solar power. So what you see here is the hockey stick graph. So if the window portions are bigger, and you can see that right here, we're increasing the portion of windows in the building shell. There are going to be more windows in the actual building. Then if the window is worse than the wall, then the primary energy consumption is going to increase. The worse the shell, the more energy is needed. But considering solar effects, the opposite is happening. So to a certain degree, the primary energy consumption is going to be lower because solar effects are going to have a positive impact, and that's why that's the case. So that is definitely a physical knowledge. That is something that has been proven by way of studies, and we're just going to have to make sure that that's also going to be part of this law in the future. And that's why we're going to say that we are going to need a new value. We either need a law that is also going to include that, or if that is not possible, we are going to have to look at the heating needs. So how much energy does my building need in order to stay warm? Those are processes that are happening right now. They're supported, and Mr. Schitzberger is going to talk about those in detail. All right, so we are going to need a climate neutral building, and we're going to have to make sure that renewable energies are going to be used and are going to be considered, because just having stricter U values are not going to get us where we need to be. That is our model that we're representing, that we definitely want to represent in Berlin. And currently, we have 20 to 25% of individual subsidies for individual measures, for example, windows, walls, roofs, and we really want to see a accumulated approach. So we want to say, okay, we're going to do the individual parts first, and then there's going to be some kind of funding if your building shell is now climate neutral and you have the EH55 standard. And if in the end I also have my heating adapted to that, or the other way around, first the heating, then the building shell, in the end you're going to have a climate neutral building, then in the end you're going to get 50% subsidies for this renovation. So this is just a process that is building on top. So you're going to start with smaller measures, but you're going to say, okay, if you now use this window, it's going to be fine. Then you're going to do the wall, then you're going to do the roof, then you're going to do the heating, and then you're going to have a climate neutral building in the end. So you're just going to do small steps first, and then you're going to have the accumulated subsidy in the end. And that is our approach that we want to represent. Two small impulses about what is innovative and what is important for us. Of course, the problem of having expert workers is a big challenge for us. And we do believe, and that is also something that the government is definitely supporting, that serial renovations will make sense. So of course, that is only going to work for certain architectures where you can just do everything. So if you have the old building, you replace it, and then you actually have a pre-prepped part. That is a contribution to our solution of the quality and processes that need to be ensured, and I do think that is definitely something that's good for us as window builders as well, because we need to have this holistic approach. We need to find a partner, and it could be an overall package. And of course, we have a situation that can be paid for. It is going to solve this problem to a point, and then also the two-step assembly. So we would have windows first. You can see windows are first here, and then everything else in the window is then going to have to survive the whole building phase. So we think that first you just need to have the construction, so the frame, window frame, and then the window is going to put it all the way in the end. There are some benefits when it comes to the construction in and of itself, but it's also a benefit for the capacities, because if you put the frame in first, you're going to need less people, but qualified people. And the window, which is then also going to have to be put into the window frame that's already in there, which is more difficult. You need more people because of triple glazing. So that could be a different situation, because you don't need statics anymore. You just have to put it in, screw it in, and that is going to make it where everything is a little bit easier. And at the end, it could also be a solution for the capacity question, and also for our market in the future, because in 20 to 30 years, when windows have to replace or need to be replaced because they're not aesthetically pleasing anymore or because they're broken, whatever, then of course this two-step concept is also going to be the solution, because you can replace it quite quickly. So if we had that today, we would have to have a redevelopment rate of 2%, because we wouldn't have to actually get rid of any walls or anything like that. So of course, that would also be a little bit more future-proof. And of course, that is also something that you're gonna be able to see at the booth right here. That's across from EFT. You can also look at it online. And of course, that is the topic we're discussing there. You're going to see that you can replace windows without any dirt. Of course, that is what all this two-step approach is all about. All right, that was it. That was everything I wanted to say for now.